Universe, Stimulus TV, friends, family. My name is David Redish. This is the second episode of Facing the Wave. And we're going to change up the format a little bit today. Yesterday was more of a podcast. Last week was more of a podcast. And today we're going to stream about 30 minutes of a documentary that I made about 5 years ago. And the subject matter is a little different in nature, although it'll make sense more as we get into it. The film's called Not Me. It's a docu-narrative about 8 true stories of teen drug addiction. And the tie-in being drugs, right? And Facing the Wave, a documentary that I'm working on psychedelics, has to do with psychedelics as medicine. And specifically not looking at them as drugs. We don't call them shrooms, and we don't go on trips. We talk about them like psilocybin, and we go on journeys, and we do them in a ceremonial way. So this is a great juxtaposition. And when I made this documentary, I was in a very different place. And the concept was to show particularly teenage viewers and parents the realities of addiction. And in doing that, we kind of took this very not rated graphic. We're not going to pretend about what may or may not be happening. We're just going to use these kids' real stories, and we're going to either document what happened or recreate what we imagine happened based on their feedback. And then I'm just going to dive into the film. I'm going to be in the chat, and I'll have a time code going next to it. So if you have something that jumps out to you that you really want to talk about, or you have a question, just drop it into the chat during the live stream. I'll take notes, and I'll also make comments during if I can quickly get you an answer. And then at the end of about 30 minutes, we'll dive in, and I'll do a more video Q&A, talk about that project, and talk about the point of this podcast and this streaming concept moving forward. So thank you for joining. The film is called Not Me. If you want to watch more of it at a later date, you can go to notme.film. And also don't forget to leave a donation to both the COVID relief fund that Stimulus is giving back to, and also tips for the streamers like myself for our time and energy that we are giving. Although please make your donations, because that is by far more important. The people who need it, who can't get the resources that they need to be healthy and happy. So please give. And as soon as we're ready, we'll jump into the film.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So a trap house is basically a drug house. You go there specifically for drugs.
8.
We pulled up and we parked, and he said, "Okay, I'll be right back." He was inside for about 15 minutes, in a good 15 minutes. We've never waited that long for anything.
It's gonna be cool. Yeah, chill the fuck out.
And I kept telling my friends, this is a bad idea, we should just go. I have a really bad feeling about this. Sometimes you just know, you just have a gut feeling, and I had that feeling.
I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here.
He comes over and he opens up the door and he pulls out a big shotgun on me and my friend in the back. So he tells us, "Give me all your money and give me all your drugs, or I'm gonna kill them both." Me and my friend are in the backseat bawling, crying, just so scared. I mean, I've never been in that situation before, so scared.
Are you okay?
After all of that, we just wanted to go home, and we still go to this guy's house to get high.
That area is just, it's kind of wealthy and nothing to do, and I feel like that's huge. It's a bunch of kids with a lot of extra money and nothing to do, and if they don't fit in, you know, like I said, the drug gang will always take you, and you're a huge asset then. You know, you have money and probably a nice car, and for whatever reason, their parents are kind of binded to any kind of drug activity and stuff like that. I think they have like a stigma in their mind that, you know, their kid's not that kid. And so they kind of deny and blind themselves to the signs.
It escalated quick. When I was 12, I'd first tried smoking weed. But already at age 13, I had done coke. The appealing thing to me was like do bad things, be a scary person, I guess, sell drugs, commit serious crimes, and I thought I was a good kid still. I guess I wanted to be bad.
You know, when you deal with a person like Brett, even from a little child, we had this little saying about Brett. It's all Brettland, or it's all about Brett. And once you have an addict in the house, it does become all about them. There's no question about that.
Welcome to Kyle's Funny Videos. It's new and improved with more funny videos. And Brett's gonna be stuntus. I'm gonna be the cameraman, and sometimes
Everything was kind of a struggle with him. Extremely ADD. I mean, we never kind of really controlled him. He just kind of flew by the seat of his pants, and it never stopped. Brett was just high maintenance.
I felt like right away, you know, because I didn't fit in with sports and stuff like that, that I couldn't find where I belonged. I definitely knew that I was kind of rebellious. That needing to belong with a group of people or with a certain somebody, and doing, you know, whatever just to be included.
Katie was a gifted athlete, exceptional student, probably one of the most driven and obedient kids that I knew at the time. She was probably the dream child for us, yeah, absolutely. Basketball ended up being the sport she picked. She excelled pretty fast, was in an environment where she was a teammate, and she loved the camaraderie of team sports. There wasn't a lot of conflict with Katie, and seemingly enjoying life.
In the beginning, it's the easiest thing in the world to find somebody to give you free drugs because misery likes company. People loved coming to my house because I was so good at lying to my parents that I could make them believe anything I wanted them to. My friends were always more important to me then because I felt like my parents didn't care about me. I felt like they didn't want me to experience, you know, being a grown-up, and they didn't think I was mature enough to do any of the things that I was doing, and I felt like I was.
Dana's very type A, very social. For the most part, he was just very agreeable, just a good kid, got along with everybody. Never caused much problems at all. Unfortunately, his father didn't have anything to do with Dane for 2 years when he was born. So there's always been this, I think, black sheep of the family. In a lot of ways, he did feel like he was different.
What I saw in Zach was that he just needed a little more time to make more friends, to feel comfortable, that this was something that he would outgrow. By the time he entered 10th grade, the anxiety had gone down, and he seemed to be a little bit more content. And I thought, well, he's accepting where he is, and he's fitting in, and he's making friends, and this is exactly what I had expected would happen, is that if it would just enough time that he would acclimate, I guess.
I started using drugs at age 12. I couldn't see anything else in the future. That's all I could see was getting high. I was all about trying things, trying something different to escape the way that I felt inside.
How does it happen? Where does it start? What are the signs? The pattern is generally the same. Take a lack of responsibility, the inability to make right choices, add to it ignorance and indifference, and top it off with a desire for escapism and kicks. The sum total is then conceivably found in the bennies, the reefer, the pop needle.
Before I used marijuana, I actually started cutting myself, and so that was my first way to escape. I can't really remember how the cutting started, but whenever I would do it, it would just release pain. I had a lot of built-up anger. I hated myself, I hated everybody.
By middle school, I was just kind of reluctant to try anything else. Just kind of wanted to not participate in stuff. Kind of became more of like a loner at school. And just, I think, really took on the stigma that I was different than everybody else. If you don't fit in, you know, with, you know, the football stars and the cheerleaders, then you're out. It was really only a matter of time, you know, when you're not doing drugs, but you're hanging out with people that do drugs, you're a ticking time bomb, and that's what I was.
I had an eating disorder. I was bulimic. I saw a therapist and a psychiatrist for it. But I wanted to have control over my body. I wanted to have control over what happened to me and just the way that I looked. And you know, you're growing up with all these people that are around you and they're beautiful and they're skinny, and that's who I wanted to be. And I felt like doing drugs made me the fun and social person that I wasn't normally, and throwing up made me skinny and pretty like all the other people that weren't like me. My thing about getting high was I wanted to be in control of my high. And if I wasn't in control of my high, I would do anything to stop being high. I didn't want to be high anymore.
Brett never did well in school. I mean, he didn't do well in school from kindergarten on. So that was never a way for us to identify if there was a change. So the things that were happening in middle school, we justified to just all those things. He wasn't doing this, it's middle school, he's a hormonal, you know, he was Brett. And I can see so much more clearly now. It's so much easier to go, oh yeah, we did that, that's not a good idea.
At 11 years old, a significant event happened. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. She resented being diabetic. She was angry about it, and she was asking constantly, you know, why me? You know, why me? Why me? Knowing then what I know now, I would tell myself that there is no way I can choose for them. She has to choose for herself to want to be helped.
He had started to express that summer some reluctance to going back to the large high school. And I was afraid that what was going to end up happening was the same thing that had initially happened, that he would be battling this anxiety problem. And the first couple of months of the smaller school, he seemed to be fitting in great. As the year progressed, Zach approached me and he told me that he was still having a lot of internal struggle with his anxiety and his depression. That was probably my first real concern that we had a huge problem, that this was maybe not what I thought it was.
Things came really easy for my oldest son and my daughter, at least he thought so. And then my second son also had some issues, mostly with drinking. So he absorbed a lot of the energy of the family. I mean, attention was put on him, not necessarily positive attention, but needed attention. So I think he just kind of got swept up with, you know, with the flow of things. You're not better, or you can't handle it better than somebody else, because I know that was something that he used to say is, oh, I know just how much is enough, or, you know, how far, you know, if I have this much, it's too far. How do you know that? You know, when do you become an expert other than usage? Yeah. I know my limits. Yeah. Famous last words.
She was just always steady and hard to read. Never wore emotions on her sleeve, always carried stuff inside. You could tell sometimes when she was heavy with something, but for the most part, you couldn't read her. You never knew what was going on, and trying to get her to talk about it was nearly impossible.
Just from my earliest memories on up, like, it was just darkness, and I thought that was just the way that life was, and so I didn't like it. Whenever I found marijuana, I thought I had found the ultimate cure. I thought I found heaven.
It's stimulating, mind expanding, safer to use than alcohol. It's the in thing, the hula hoop of the jet generation, and as much a part of growing up as smoking corn silk behind the back fence. Such are the myths concerning marijuana. Myths that lull thousands of young people into experimenting with a noxious weed. The facts are otherwise. Marijuana is an intoxicating, mind-muddling drug. Its use can lead to abnormal behavior, to psychological dependence, and to abuse of other drugs. The human brain, after all, is made for thinking, not fumigating. It's hardly a tinker toy for experimenting with drugs.
Being 14 and 15 and 16, you already have so many hormones going through your body and you're already trying to figure yourself out. And so it was just all of those things combined really played into how I did drugs and why I did them.
The first sign that I ever had that he could possibly be using drugs, it wasn't his friend group. His friend group had not changed. It was the fact that my dryer sheets were showing up all over the house. The little square dryer sheets that you throw in the dryer, they were showing up around the house because what I found out he was doing later on was rubbing his coat or his clothing to get rid of the smell or to mask the smell. I had no reason to doubt or to question a sign in my house that now to me seems very obvious.
What was Brett's first use that we remember? And it was the day after school got out of 6th grade. And Kyle came in our bedroom. It was about midnight. Kyle came in our bedroom and he said, "Mom, Dad, somebody needs to get up. The police have Brett in the alley." And I'm like, "What do you mean the police have Brett in the alley?" He was caught smoking cigarettes. So I assume that that was his first use of something illegal. I was not smoking at the time. Ben was smoking at the time. So it was kind of hard to yell at him for doing something that his father was doing as well. So we kind of, what were you thinking? And kind of blew it off.
We were in a friend's backyard and they asked me and my friend if we wanted to smoke. They had a bong with them. We had never smoked before, but of course we said yes. I coughed for probably an hour and a half and I don't really think I got high, but of course we acted like we did because we were so afraid of not acting the way we were supposed to.
Going into 8th grade summer, I think, is really when I started kind of branching out and trying other drugs. I went from pot to ecstasy, and I stayed on ecstasy for quite a while. I knew pills were a bad idea. I knew it was a huge difference between just smoking weed and doing other drugs. But a lot of the people I knew at the time were doing ecstasy and nobody was dropping dead, so I guess that's, to me, made it okay in my mind. I was never really considered pot to be drugs, but I knew ecstasy was.
I don't think I felt like it was wrong. I mean, there are people that do it and they're okay with it, and especially if parents are okay with it, then it shouldn't be a big deal. And I told myself all the time, it's not like I'll ever get addicted to it.
I'm sure his brother had some influence on his behavior. Unfortunately, I would have thought his brother's bad behavior would have been an influence for Dane not to get into trouble because he saw how much it was demanding on the family, financially, emotionally, time-wise, but it didn't go quite that way.
So I thought this rehab would just fix me. I didn't quite understand. I didn't know what the 12 steps were. I knew there were 12 steps that I had to do, and I would stay sober, and I'd go to these AA meetings. So I didn't do any of that. I didn't work any steps. I didn't really go to any meetings. I never found a sponsor. I just went right back home after those 30 days. I was taking Seroquel at that treatment center, and they gave me a 2-week supply when I got out. Before I even got on the plane, while I was still in Tucson, Arizona, I took about half of that, hoping to get high. I mean, it was immediate. 2 hours of getting out of treatment, I abused the prescription medication.
What can be the harm? After all, the 20th century is run on pills. A pill for extra vitamins, a pill to go to sleep, a pill to wake up. Why not a pill to make you feel good? But that small red capsule is a dangerous drug to be administered by a competent physician, not by a newly found boyfriend. But the pressure of the group, the need to belong, the desire to try something new is too great a temptation.
So my friend had some Adderall and we took it at lunch. I went into my 6th period class, which was social studies, and we were gonna watch a movie that day, so of course I put my head down, I was gonna go to sleep. But I was awake the whole time. But the next thing I know, I lift my head up and the period was over. It was like the whole hour had vanished. I had no idea what was going on. It wasn't what they said was gonna happen, so I don't really know if I got high, but I felt like I was high. It felt like I was gliding through the halls. My friends had to help carry me down the stairs into my next period class because I couldn't walk by myself.
Brett actually came to us and said, I really want focused medicine. That's what he said. I really want to get some focused medicine so I can do better in school. Because of the fact that I don't take pills, I probably left it more to him than I should have. It was kind of like, oh, did you take your pill this morning? Yeah, I took it.
What I saw in Zach was a change in behavior, and I assumed and associated the behavior with something completely different than what was actually happening. He had found a coping mechanism. Zach was smoking pot before he went to school, and that was calming his anxiety.
Dane's very outgoing, so he made friends. Probably didn't make the best friends, but was involved with football to begin with. But then they started doing random drug testing and found out that he was using pot. At that time, I thought he was only using pot and alcohol. And honestly, like most parents, you know, you think they're gonna outgrow it at some point in time, or they do it in moderation.
I started using triple C's. Triple C's are also known as DXM, dextromorphine. And basically what that is, it's a cough suppressant. I didn't even question what it would do to me. They said it would mess me up, and so maybe 30 minutes to an hour later, I was high in class.
I noticed that she was starting to gravitate to a different crowd. All of a sudden, the interest in various things like tattoos and piercing and cigarettes, all that stuff just became important to her, and that was never there before. Didn't see that coming. And it was all what I thought was just normal, maybe adjustment time after separation. Now she's got 2 homes, and I kind of let that go without really a second thought.
The skateboarding thing is kind of when I should have, when we started seeing really a difference. There was a point where he had friends in the skateboard land that we never saw.
He wasn't out partying with friends necessarily, getting high on Fridays. He was, I believe, an everyday user, and I think he was using it to cover up symptoms. Well, not to cover up, to deal with symptoms of a larger issue, which was anxiety and depression. Eventually, I ended up finding some paraphernalia in his room, and I found a Xanax bar, a pill. I confronted him with that. Of course, he blamed it on a friend. I stripped his room completely of everything. I left him a mattress on the floor. I gave him 1 set of clothes to change into, and I told him that if he was involved in any way whatsoever with drugs, either through a friend or not, that prison may possibly be in his future, and I wanted him to have a little taste of it.
At that time, Brett had just a regular pediatrician appointment, and you know, Brett's a pretty big boy. And so we get to the office, and there's the little chairs, the little pediatrician chairs for all these little kids. So she called him back, and it was just a physical, so I didn't think anything of it, and I was like, you can just go back by yourself. And so he went and had his physical, and that night my phone rang. and it was the pediatrician. And she said, I just want to let you know that I had a conversation with Brett, and he is starting to experiment with drugs. And I said, can you be more specific? And she said, no, I can't. And it's because I didn't go in that room with him, and he was about 14. Brett's smoking pot. I know it. I told you about it. Brett's smoking pot. She never said that. That was my form of denial. But had she said then, I suggest you drug test him, we would have been, right then and there, we would have realized that we were way beyond pot.
She was getting really good at making me believe what was going on with somebody else that she was just hanging around with. Hey, what's really going on here? And the minute she said, I'm not doing that stuff, Dad, then I believed her because I wanted to believe her.
I would say Dane switched from pot into harder drugs in sophomore year. And at that time, he was pretty lethargic. He was always tired. He was losing weight. He was not completing his homework. Teachers would let me know that he was falling asleep in class. He was confining himself to his room a lot and not really caring.
I was on my way to Houston for a music festival, and it was late at night. It was a last-minute planned trip. It was me and my friends, and we got pulled over for speeding. I was going like 2 miles an hour over.
Hey, doing tonight? I'm Officer Rainberg. I need to see your driver's license, your proof of insurance, please. You have your insurance with you?
The officer was going to give me a warning.
Wait right here, I'll be right back with you.
I had a bunch of beer in the car too, and my friend in the back seat tried to cover it up.
Go ahead and step out of the car for me.
And then he saw all the beer.
Step back here and put your hands on top of the car.
He wasn't going to charge me with the DUI. He wasn't going to charge me with the weed or the paraphernalia. He was just going to take it and let me go. When he opened the door, a bong fell out and broke on the asphalt. He was like, well, I thought I smelled something, and then he opened up my glove box and found the mushrooms and the meth, and then I went to jail for that.
She started hanging around with a young man, and I didn't dislike him, but he was very charming, outgoing, charismatic, but different. Katie found out several months into the relationship that he was using heroin. He hid it pretty well from her at the beginning. When she found out he was using heroin, at this time, Katie wasn't using drugs.
The first time I'd smoked meth, it was about once a month for 6 months. I tried to put stipulations on it or tried to control it, like I won't do it alone or I won't do it more than once a month, because I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was an addictive substance, but I had no idea that I was already addicted.
First time I got high off of cocaine, I was at the club. You go into the bathroom and you get a key and you dip it in and you snort it. And it was so good. My body's getting warm just thinking about it. Just the taste, you can taste it the whole way down. And then your heart starts beating 1,000,000 miles a minute. And you can't stop it, but you don't want it to stop because that's what's making you feel so good, all the adrenaline pumping through. You know, everybody was smoking pot or doing heroin or doing meth, and I didn't really like doing any of those things anymore anyways. So when I started doing coke, it was like, oh my God, I finally found it. I finally found what I was supposed to be doing. You know, I should have been doing this the whole time.
My love affair with heroin started very quick. The first time I did heroin, I was at a friend's house, and I tried cheese for the first time, which is the sleeping pills and heroin mix that you snort. It felt like if you just had like a huge barrel of warm honey and you just pour it all over your body. I remember passing out and just throwing up all over the bathroom floor. I knew then and there, like, you know, the ecstasy and all that shit was bullshit. This is where I wanted to be.
Opiates are classed as depressants. An overdose causes unconsciousness, then death. A smaller dose, taken into the bloodstream, inhibits all the functions of the body by its action on the brain and the central nervous system. But the body gradually builds up a tolerance to the drug. More and more is needed to produce the same effects. After continued use, the body acquires a physical dependence on opiates.
At one point, I thought it was depression. I knew he was still, or at least I thought he was still smoking pot. He and his girlfriend were always
Hey, there we are. Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't want to be talking during the film, and then you couldn't hear me to begin with. So, what I was saying was, we're going to do this sort of installment style, showing the film in parts. And I think we're going to do that in 3 parts over the next 3 episodes. And then we're going to break, and I'll answer questions that we were talking about through the live Q&A. Because ultimately, I want to use the film as an engagement piece to talk about what's going on today, to talk about this project on psychedelics and plant medicine, and not just sit and watch the film. I can give you the link for that, or you can tune in the next couple weeks, and we'll finish watching it. So I'm going to jump into some of the questions that came up during the chat, and kind of tie that all full circle. So one question that came up that I thought was really important was, where is this happening? Is there any geographical information that's going to come up during the film? And we very specifically took all that information out of the film. I know before our project came out, there was a film called Behind the Orange Curtain. And it was about a similar subject matter, more like Oxycontin and just pill addictions. And it was all happening in like Orange County, California, which was a very clever title, but it gave folks sort of this easy cop out to say, you know, this isn't happening where I'm from, or this isn't relevant to me, so it doesn't matter. And the reality with this kind of particularly teen and just addiction in general is that it's proliferated our culture. It is everywhere. And kind of to stem that into another question that came up, which was, what was the biggest thing that I learned during the making of this project? And you know, I started working on this at the beginning of 2015, and pretty much took until about the end of that year to complete the project. So there's a lot of time like sitting with all the interviews, going through them, writing them into the recreations of like all the B-roll and all the storylines that you see happening. And then of course, editing the film, like days and days and days on end of rewatching a lot of these traumatic events. And as we watch more of the film, I'm sure you can imagine things get a bit more heavy and serious. And that weighed on me. And at first I was just like, well, prescription drugs are the number one reason why this is happening, or parents being oblivious, or whatever it was. But all that really boiled down to a really simple idea, and that's community. And if you look through, specifically our US culture across the board, we lack a lot of community. We're super isolated. We're driven to be individuals, in school, in the way we compete, in sports and for jobs and for money and for all these things. And so this idea of community, of sharing, of, oh, my friend's son is going through this, therefore we're hurting too, versus, oh yeah, the Redish's kid is having a problem. That's tough. I hope that doesn't happen to us. The reality is it's happening to us, whether it is your kid or your brother or your sister, or it's you, so this title of the film, right? Not me, right? It speaks completely to this issue, which is denial, which is like, it's not me, it's not my life, it's not my brother, it's not my child. But the reality is, it's all those people, because this problem is affecting all of us. So what I learned is that community is both the problem, because we have a lack of it, and the solution to this problem, because when we come together and fully see each other as somebody who's feeling isolated and therefore reaching for a substance to cope with it, we see how the feedback loops are very obvious in that way, of that, well, if you just let them go off to their room and close the door behind them, and I'm doing homework all night, don't talk to me, they create this isolation further and further. And it's also going on in this current time with this pandemic, because we are literally physically disconnected, which makes it really important to engage with these social platforms. When I was reached out to do Twitch, I felt like maybe that's not my medium. I'm more of like a written word, create my films, create this distance between me and the end product, and then watch it, from a distance. And I need this connection. So I think it's important that we all notice that in our lives, because it's easy to reach for a substance to supplement, what we're lacking. So, may this film be a good touch point. And of course, you can reach out to me, and there's lots of other sources, but ultimately finding those community touch points to just help us move through the days and move through our traumas. So also something came up about having some of the subjects of the films on set during the recreation segments. And that, we wanted them there mainly to consult, to make sure we were being like authentic to what they had spoken about. And then this really cool byproduct happened, which was they were really getting something out of being on set. I kind of thought it'll be cool. People like being on movie sets with like lights and cameras, and it's really interesting to watch it happen sometimes. But what I found was that they were like having this whole like outer body experience of seeing us recreate their experience just based on the interview that they had given, which was a very like candid telling of what happened, and us taking it and running with it, and creating sometimes something that was a little more over the top, and sometimes something a little more stripped back and dark, but overall creating the emotion that they were sort of giving on camera. And ultimately, it came down to me and the crew's interpretation of what was happening. And, that was what we came up with. And it was a really cool byproduct to see some of those, folks from the film be impacted in a positive way. There was actually talk about not having them be on set for a while because they would be triggered, which wasn't my call at the end of the day. But my reaction to that was, there's already a million things they could go out and watch and see that are going to trigger them. If this is the thing that sends them back into their addiction, I can't see that being the case. Ultimately, was my opinion, but I didn't have to make that call, and thankfully everything worked out in a super positive way. So I'm going to look at the chat real quick and see if any other cool things have been coming up. So let's talk about how this ties into this larger project and why I jumped onto this Stimulus TV network to begin with. And that is a documentary project called Facing the Wave, which, the title sort of explains that we are facing a wave of change. And what I'm talking about is with psychedelics and plant medicine, that there is this overhaul that has been coming, since the 60s, but it is now proliferating in a much more public and professional way. I think the conversations of just that's for hippies and out there people is sort of drifted quite far away from the conversation of there's major capital behind these projects, research with groups like MAPS, and we have tons of private equity pouring into psychedelics as medicine. So it's definitely become more legitimate. And the concept of the documentary is looking at all these different facets, both from ceremonial use to therapeutic and clinical use, and approaching them as, as a news source, as both a healing mechanism and as a cultural transformation. Because as these substances, as medicines and plants become more commonplace, maybe more reached for than the pharmaceuticals that we were watching in the film, there's potentially a likelihood that the collective consciousness starts to shift around these things. I mean, it already is. That's why we're talking about them. So, I think with looking at a film like Not Me, where we're looking at drugs, addiction, and looking ahead into this other project, Facing the Wave, where we're talking about plants and medicine, also it having just been Earth Day. I mean, we're talking about a disconnection from our environment and retreating inside with drugs and these sort of substances versus this connection to the earth. I did ayahuasca and now I want to go hug a tree. Why is that? Is there some strange connection there? Well, obviously we know it's not that strange. There's a reason why we are part of nature and we're meant to be embraced by it. So part of the project is sort of bridging the gap of woo-woo spiritualism because we don't have the right vocabulary to talk about it in a way that seems scientific yet, and bridging it into the science and more medical side. So that's kind of where we're going to eventually take this. If there were any more questions specifically about the film, I can certainly talk about many stories. And yes, Johns Hopkins is a group that is doing some really cool things. MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Academy of Psychedelic Sciences, has been doing tons of studies with MDMA and PTSD, with psilocybin. I know that there's many other substances that they're doing research with that is on different levels and different countries where they're able to do more research and that it may be legal. In regards to Not Me, I think, so I can bring this kind of full circle from my own perspective. When I was approached to make the film, I didn't understand how drug addiction had any impact on my life. I was pretty oblivious to it, like many of the parents. And my friend, Benton, who's one of the producers of the film, he called me and said, hey, we've got this promo film that this nonprofit wants to make. It's about teen drug addiction. And we just did a few of the interviews and they're pretty interesting. And it was only supposed to be a 10-minute thing, but we've already shot a few hours worth of interviews. And maybe we think we want to make a film out of it. Maybe you want to be involved. Would you want to watch it? And so I was like, sure. So I went into their studio and spent about a week or so watching all these interviews that they had already started compiling and just taking notes and sort of seeing some through lines and ultimately getting a firsthand education in addiction, and particularly teen addiction, and kind of starting to see from a sort of outside perspective of somebody who didn't feel connected to the subject matter in any way, that I was connected to it, that this already was going on around me, that I had my own, denials and traumas that I wasn't dealing with or looking at. And so I saw the film as a window, both for me to learn and to look into and show other people, hey, this is going on right next door to where you grew up or where your kids are or where you went to school. And it's not stopping just because you don't think about it. So it was sort of this moment of, wow, there's a lot more I can do with this filmmaking thing than just make cool stuff and make things look pretty and shoot pretty girls and do whatever. It was like, wow, I can actually use my talent to explore these subjects. So, since that time, 5 years ago, pretty much shifted all of attention into doing this sort of documentary storytelling, where it's like, what do I want to learn about? What do I feel like I need to know more about? And then convert that into, cinema, so other people can dive in with me. And with a film like Not Me, I dove in head first and I learned about all these issues, and I sat in on these sort of like AA and NA meetings with teenagers. And sort of to circle back to a question somebody asked about, do they have AA or NA meetings for teenagers? And they do. They're not that well attended, which is just a whole problem with the whole like system of like this denial thing that we were talking about. And then there are like these sort of private groups or nonprofits like Winning the Fight, which is the group that helped fund this documentary with me. And they create these sort of like outreach groups where if your teenager is going through addiction or overdoses and is in the hospital and you don't know what to do, they have like a hotline, and they have other resources online for parents that are going through this, and for teens that need a place to reach out. They do at least weekly, like kind of, round table discussions where it's similar to the typical AA thing where everybody's, how are you doing? Different people get the floor and can dive into what's going on. And that was one of the things that showed me that community was one of these healing aspects that needed to, be implemented more in our culture in order to see these problems start to, lift, I think. Which, no, I'm kind of like rambling here because there's a lot of fun things to talk about, but to tie it back into the plant medicine, I had like some really interesting conversations with shaman and practitioners who do more ceremonial plant medicine experiences. And they're talking about in certain tribal settings where you've got children in the ceremony and they are, with their parents, obviously, and they're being taken care of and they're safe. But there's this thing that's happening. It's like you have a 9-year-old taking this little like bit of ayahuasca, and they're literally going up to the shaman and saying, "Hey, I'll have this much," and they're doing it. And maybe I had a friend who like walked outside at some point during a ceremony and was speaking with one of the kids, and they're just kind of looking at being a kid. They're not going crazy. They're not like having some traumatic experience. And the friend of mine asked, "What's going on?" And she just said, "Yeah, I'm just connecting to the planet, and just this is really crazy. Just totally present and having this different experience." So there is this whole idea we have in Western culture around drugs and medicine and the abuse of them that obviously doesn't exist in these tribal settings. Their whole relationship with things like medicine are like, I have an ailment to the point where like I'm sick, dying, can't work, can't do what I need to do to be part of the tribe. Now the whole tribe is hurting because I'm injured or sick or have some psychological ailment, which they definitely understand. And they use these type of plant medicines and ceremonies and other, substances, if you will, to create that healing, for their community. But they do it in community and together. And I think that word is just going to keep resonating throughout, this show and this documentary on psychedelics, because it's not intended, I think, that we just go and do these substances, drugs, medicine, whatever you want to call them, these psychedelic plants or substances, and just wander off on our own and be isolated. Like, we know that goes against our human nature. And ultimately, if we, sit and think about it, most of the problems, the anxieties, the depressions that many of us feel come from being isolated. And so, that is something we want to like talk about and create more avenues of community with this project. So for the last few minutes, I want to propose an idea, and hopefully some folks show up in the chat and make some comments about it. We're talking about, I've been developing this documentary, Facing the Wave, right? Which is probably like a docu-series where we go down different paths around plant medicine, whether it's the more like corporate and clinical studies that are happening, the more ceremonial and tribal aspects, the more personal, like I have PTSD and I've been using microdosing, or I did ayahuasca and it helped me do this. and follow all these different paths to really see how plant medicine is proliferating our culture, and creating like positive feedback loops. And so that's something I've already been doing and started filming a little bit and brought a bunch of producers and partners in. But in this time, it's very interesting to maybe think of using Twitch and this online community to create the film, to both do, pieces where I stream certain parts of the project and then we talk about them, whether it's, clips from interviews or footage from being in the jungle with someone and talking about a plant or medicine, or doing just a one-on-one podcasting format where I'm interviewing some expert and getting their insight. So yeah, is that something that's interesting to you? Throw that in the comments. Twitch is, this emergent platform. I know it's been around for a while, particularly used for gaming. So using it in this more narrative storytelling, this emergent storytelling platform, I think there's something to that. I'd love to explore it with you guys. So I'm going to wrap up. Don't forget to make donations, please. There's buttons below where I'm talking. And you can both make donations to the COVID relief fund that Stimulus works with, and also to the streamers like myself for our time and energy. We definitely appreciate it, and it gives us, a little extra matcha in our morning so we can get these ideas together and share something hopefully beneficial with you. And so, on the next few streams, we're going to go back to the film. We're going to watch some other parts of it. Hopefully it opens some more discussions. And maybe I can bring in someone from the project or somebody who wants to talk about it with me. And we could do a little interview as well and tie it into this project and how it's going to move forward with Facing the Wave. And then also moving forward, we're going to do a lot of cool interviews with folks who are working on how plant medicine is being used to curb addiction and substance abuse. Looking at speaking with some different shaman and curanderas, like medicine men and women who serve medicine and are willing to talk about why they do it and what the point of the ceremonies are and what medicine they're working with and how they came about working in that way. I think that's a really beneficial perspective that most of us don't get, and I certainly haven't gotten enough of it. So if I can share that conversation I'm having with you guys, that feels good. Also speaking with people on the more like tech and corporate side of psychedelics, groups that are doing all kinds of microdosing approaches and platforms and apps that can track your progress. I've heard of some really cool innovative companies that have like a clinician, decentralized clinician formats where they have people who will come sit with you to do medicine. So the list goes on, and I'm so excited to share it with you guys. Please leave comments. You can hit me up on Instagram at RedishD, REDISH, D as in David, and I will answer any questions. I'm happy to chat about any and all the subject matter. I spend a lot of my time researching and speaking and thinking about it. So yeah, join me in the conversation, and I'm going to throw it back to the folks in charge. Thank you for your time. Peace.